Well, no.
Yes, I saw the guy. So I'm probably at some point going to stand up and
Go right ahead.
just don't say.
I'll just say he's about ready to pass. What?
Audience, okay?
I'll be done in a minute.
Hey, good evening. We're calling to order the Millbrae School District regular board meeting of January the 11th, 2018 at 7 p.m. here in the Millbrae City Council chambers. We're reconvening to regular session after finishing with our closed session. So we'll begin this evening with the flag salute. And could I ask Lynn Ferrario to lead us in that?
Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This meeting is being televised and recorded for the transcription of the minutes. This meeting will be replayed on MCTV, Channel 27, on Saturday, January 13th, 2018, this way? Okay, thank you. At 11:30 a.m. and the following Monday, January 15th, 2018, at 3:30 p.m. At this time, speakers wishing to address the board this evening should turn in the completed speaker card to the board secretary. Item 5.3, there was no action taken in closed session. Item 5.4, I would call for approval of the agenda for this meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Ferrario, second by trustee Ravello. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda passes. I should note that all board member trustees are here this evening with the exception of Frank Barbaro, who is recovering from an illness and hopes to join us by next month. So that's good news for us all. We'll now proceed to presentations. 6.1 LCAP mid-year review. Claire Beltrami.
Good evening, President Fema, board members, cabinet, and viewers that are here tonight with us. This evening, I have the pleasure of bringing some of our support staff who have been instrumental in helping us achieve our goals through our LCAP's actions and items. First of all, this is our time to do our mid-year review. It's in the timeline of our LCAP, our Local Control Accountability Plan, where we are looking at our district plan. And I'm excited that we actually have the same template for the first time since LCAP was conceived by the state. So we're not learning a new template this year in order to complete our requirements. We are now having the same exact template, and we're able to look at what our metrics, our outcomes, what we wanted to do, and see if we were able to make all of the goals, and then review the data and bring this out to all of our stakeholders so that we can then proceed on our new LCAP that will be compiled for our next school year. So once again, our accountability system is new in California. It's the California dashboard, and it's comprised of two separate sections. They're the state performance, which are the lovely color pies that I've presented to you in the past, and also the local performance goals, which are the ones that are done at our own site, and I did a presentation on how we did this year in our November board meeting. This is just a reminder of what the dashboard now looks like, and you can access it at californiadashboard.gov. It looks like the pies, and there's different elements that they are grading us on and making sure that we are showing the growth that we anticipate through our actions and goals. One of the main ones that the state monitors us on is our our student testing that goes on from grades 3 through 8, and that happens every spring. This is the measure that they look at our student progress in English language arts and in math. We are now going to be doing a baseline this year in science, but so there won't be any growth to compare it to. Last year, our students piloted the new science for the computer adaptive test, and this year we will be doing the baseline testing, and that's only in grades 5th and 8th. These are our student results for our current year, and it's showing our groups once again with our achievement goal, our achievement gaps in red. This is for English language arts, and this is for our mathematics. So looking at LCAP Goal 1, these were the overview of the outcomes of what we expected our students to do in this area. So therefore, these are our metrics. And what I've done in red is listed whether or not our metrics were met or not. For Goal 1, expected measurable outcome A, our teachers are fully credentialed and teaching in the right capacity, so our metrics was met. For Goal B and C, these were based on an estimate that we made for our expected achievement in our student scores on the CASP testing, based on how our growth was with the prior type of testing. What we didn't take into account is that the new testing that we now our students are taking is a computer adaptive testing. So it's a different type of a testing because the questions for the students as they take the test are changed depending on how they answer the test. So because of the way that the testing is for the individual students, it's a better actual level of it's a better indicator of their actual level because the test questions change depending if they get the answer correct. They get a harder question. If they get it wrong, they get an easier question. So we're not going to get those gaps and jumps that we used to get when we did the old paper and pencil multiple choice type, because the deviation was much greater because it was just all the same questions, and so some of them got them right and some of them got them wrong. And depending on the year, you could have a big jump in the results. So because of the type of testing that it is, we didn't think about the change in the test when we made these estimates, and we actually projected that our students would make 3 percentage gains, and they actually only made 1, which is an achievement because you must remember that every year the test gets harder for their grade level. So by increasing our overall success, making a 1% gain, our students did make grade level and beyond growth. So for our LCAP Goal 1, this is the overall scores, how our average students are doing. For our metrics D, that was one of our local indicators, and we met that. Our students are getting the standards aligned curriculum as we go through our implementation process, and we've been doing pilots in our schools, and we've been bringing in new curriculum as it becomes available. And we're maintaining our facilities in good repairs, and that's part of our SARC report. For LCAP Goal 2, this is where we were looking at more of the individual subgroups, and for our A and B, our low social economics, our ELs, and our foster youth, we didn't succeed in making the 5% growth. Similar to what I stated with our last metrics, is we overestimated what those students could possibly do because of the computer adapted type of test. And then also the special ed students with disabilities, they didn't make the amount of jump that we expected them to make because we didn't think about it. So this is one of the things that we have to kind of use as a guide as we go and write our new LCAP goals for this year. We have to be really more sensitive to the fact of the type of testing that these students are taking and be more realistic on what the measure can go with those different groups. For maintaining the increasive percentage of English language learners that are reclassified, we met that metrics, which means that we're reclassifying most of our students who are ELs as RFEPs, English proficient. And also, we are decreasing the number of students that are going into our special ed programs through our RTI and our MTS initiatives. We are maintaining the percentage of teachers receiving professional development. Our professional development days that we have for our teachers is staying currently at between 93% and 95% teachers attending. So we're having good turnouts for our professional development days. For LCAP Goal 3, these are some of the more difficult types of things to measure at this time. So in regards to our chronic absenteeism and our attendance rate, that information is not available for us yet on the dashboard. The state's still working out on what are the cut points and how they're going to compare the data. So it's not available at this time, but I'll keep you posted as soon as it is available. I'll share that information with you. We have been able to lower our suspension rates. We have been maintaining our expulsion rate, which is still 0 so far for last year and this year. We've maintained the current middle school dropout rate, and we have increased our parent involvement. So, our next steps. We are using our surveys once again to reach out to our stakeholders. We're going to be surveying our parents and our staff in regards to our goals that we have in our LCAP, and we're going to be getting their input on what they feel are the important action services and what is being successful and helping our students to achieve the metrics that we've laid out. And one of the main things in our LCAP that I wanted to focus on tonight is our increased and improved services for our unduplicated our students. So these are the supplemental grants that we get that we have to earmark for our students who are EL or low social economic or foster youth. And what I've asked tonight is to have some of our staff come out and share what they're doing in regards to supporting these types of students. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker tonight, Mr. Drew Evangelista. He's our middle school ELD coordinator, and he's going to share some of the things that he's been working on this year.
Thanks, Claire. Good evening, everyone. So my role right now has two basic parts. One of them's in the classroom, and then the other kind of half is as ELD coordinator. So my role in the classroom is as our structured English immersion teacher at Taylor, which is two classes. The first class is our newcomers to the country, which are students who are basically new to the country this year or within the last year. Possibly started at one of our elementary schools in the spring last year and then into Taylor this year. And then students that we get along the way this year, which is always anywhere from 3 to 5 students as we go throughout the year that come from several different countries throughout the year into our school. And that class period, that class is 2 classes long. And then my second class is similar in that it's students who have been in the country probably about a year. Again, it's depending on their English proficiency level, but students that have been at one of our elementary schools for a year in 5th grade, or with me the year before with their first or possibly 1.5 years in our school for the first time learning English, and that class is 1 period long. The most exciting thing happening right now is just this week we're starting a new pilot called iLit, which is a new English curriculum that is mostly web-based and it's digital. And the great thing about it has all the benefits of that you would get with a technologically modern program, but still has the rigors of a good language program. So just a quick overview of what's happening in my class is we have our Chromebooks that our students are looking at that is replacing kind of their textbooks, and also is a dashboard for everything that we do. And at the same time, I'm walking around the classroom looking at their work, looking at my teacher guide on my Chromebook or device, and then projecting our lessons on our board. So it's interactive where I can be around the classroom with each student, working with them, seeing what they're doing, and then at the same time, they're able to turn and talk to each other, and with all the language practice that we'd want in a good language program. So that's the thing happening right now in my classroom, and I'm excited to get that going this year. And again, that's starting just this week. The second part of my job right now is ELD coordinator, with emphasis at Taylor and Lomita Park. And so the focus at Lomita Park and Taylor, the connection is that between the two schools is trying to identify this year our potential long-term English learners, which are students who are in the have EL status for 6 or more years. And again, this usually happens around middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and into high school, and struggle to become English proficient in that time. So what was the old CELT test and now the LPAC test, those students are having trouble becoming proficient in English, and they're our long-term English learners. So to hopefully get to the point where we are getting those students to be proficient, we're hoping to identify them at Lomita Park, where the cluster of those students have in the past come from, identify them, and I'm working with 5th grade teachers and groups of students in other grades to this year identify their needs, support those teachers with strategies to help those students, and then improve the transition from Lomita Park to Taylor, where those students where I can inform strategies and practices that will help those students exit or become proficient in English by the time they get to Taylor, 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. So right now I'm in 5th grade classrooms, the 2 5th grade classrooms at Lomita Park, a couple times a week, and working with a couple of other students at the same time, and some other grades that we've identified that could use support. The other thing that's happening this year that's exciting is the transition from the CELT test to the LPAC test. And that's our new English language proficiency test. It's not a huge difference in terms of changing the test, but it does better align to the state ELD standards, and we'll be administering that at February at all schools, and we're excited to get that rolling for the first time. So that's what's happening in terms of our ELD program. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Miss Julie Constantino, who has a dual role in the Millbrae School District. She is our new teacher induction, which is the old BITSA program that has been revamped. And she's also a consultant for us with the California Reading and Literacy Project.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. I am in year 4 as a new teacher or induction support provider, but it is our third, thank you. It's our 3rd year with me being released from the classroom to do this work, which enables me to be able to travel to different sites and also do observations and really immerse myself in that work. So it works out to 2 days a week that I'm mostly at Taylor this year, because that's sort of where a lot of the new teachers are. I am, that are induction new teachers, I should say. We're continuing the goal of trying to offer a 3-pronged approach to new teacher support: the personal and emotional, the task and problem specific. So when teachers are having a problem with a certain afternoon class or a subject or classroom management or finding the best seating arrangement, things like that. And then also really the most important, which is the critical reflection on teaching practice. So what we do in induction is we keep repeating the process of plan, teach, reflect, refine, and we sort of just keep at that. And the idea is that we are building that practice so that when the new teachers do not have a coach, they are doing that. And one of the layers that was added into the induction cycles this year is that the teachers have to seek out multiple people, contacts to support them. And so they actually have to log all the places that they're going to besides me for help. And so what happens in that is that they're really building a system of support around them, and they're really understanding that I don't hold all the answers. I have some ideas about some things that would work and some suggestions, but it's really about them reflecting and finding their way with guidance. And so that's a lot of the work that I do. So I really can't share exactly what a typical day looks like because they're able to share with me if they have a bad day. And that's things that they don't want to share with their boss, and they may not want to share with the teacher next door because they don't want to be judged. And so it's a really protected, special mentoring relationship. And so that's most of my work because I have 6 teachers. So it doesn't free me up as much as I'd like to go be around to help anybody that needs help. And so what we offered, wait, let me look here. I got to stay on my slides. Okay, so when we are involved, when we offer BITSA or induction, we do that through San Mateo County Office of Education. And there are some benefits besides those few teachers. They also allow us as support providers to get coaching and professional development through that network at the county. And they also offer sessions to any teachers at a very discounted rate. For example, if there was a teacher not enrolled in induction who was having trouble adapting lessons to, English language learners or things like that, they provide professional development for that as well. So that it's a nice connection that we have with them through BITSA, now called induction. I do some administrative support. Last year when we had newer principals, I did a little bit more of that in the year before, but now we kind of have a crew that's been back, and so I was just going to talk to Vaughn about going in again in spring and just kind of talking a little bit about new teacher support, and I did that at the beginning of the year. They do email me, and if they have questions about different offerings that might help their teachers. Right now I have 6 teachers. 1 is at Meadows and 5 are at Taylor that are assigned to me, and I spend the bulk of my time with them. Aaron Zlatinich is also supporting 1 teacher at Meadows, and Theodokis is supporting 1 teacher at Spring Valley. And that was really important that we didn't, in the beginning I would have said yes, 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 but to really preserve the quality, we're meeting a lot, and the program's pretty rigorous. And so I appreciated the support and having other support providers come in since we had a big number this year. So I'm going to move us along. Each year the support changes a little bit, and because it's my 3rd year in this role, I was able to see that if I could keep my new teachers on their deadlines, I should be done at May 15th, which gives me some time. May 15th, sometimes they're not done on time, but it gave me some time at the end of the year to work with Claire and Ed Services on revamping new teacher orientation. And so we worked on that. And I took that on as much as I could. I needed a lot of help, and I learned a lot. And we were able to offer 1.5 days in August because my feeling was we sort of send them off to their classrooms, and what if they're struggling? We don't really know. So I pulled them back for 2 after-school sessions, 1 in September and 1 in October. So we used to do 2 full days, so I just sort of banked those hours and we had them come back. And that way we were able to troubleshoot for them a little bit if they were having issues in their classroom. We were able to time the support instead of giving them everything at once. For example, that last session in October, they got to learn how to do progress reports and report cards right before they had to do progress reports and report cards. So I thought it was a good change. It's a busy 2 months. It's hard to make that happen. We were really happy when we crossed it off the list. But I think it was teacher-centered, and I think it was a good move. And then we try to do ongoing support. Like I said, we have at Meadows and Spring Valley, we have support providers there. And at Taylor, Mr. Zader and I co-host on the first Thursday of the month a new teacher lunch. And so it's for just to kind of say, here's what's happening at Taylor this month. If there's field trips, if there's assemblies, he puts together the logistics, and I try and take care of hospitality, treats, and making it fun. But usually just by me being in there, he facilitates, but I try to listen in to what maybe the challenges are so that I can better offer support. We also have after-school support sessions that are drop-in, and they're open to any teacher in the district. And I just kind of have a calendar and a topic, and I hang out in H7, and they haven't been super well attended, but so we'll take that data and we'll look at it. But I have had a couple teachers come in and be able to meet with me one-on-one, and so that's been a nice thing that I can offer the principals if someone's struggling or someone they think might need some help, that they can come in and see me for some troubleshooting. So let's go to the next thing. So I'm going to put on my other hat now, because the other days that I do not work in Millbrae, I serve as the co-director of the California Reading and Literature Project. And I should mention that the partnership between Millbrae and the California Reading and Literature Project is, I think we're at 9 years that I can think back to. So it's been a while. And I got involved just as a teacher participant in a professional training and liked it, and became a teacher leader, which is a voluntary thing that you do, and you just go and get to learn alongside other, we call ourselves the geeky teachers that sort of can't get enough of learning about literature and literacy and instruction and best practices. So it's a great group, and it's part of a statewide network, and so I'm really proud to be a part of it. Our work is really around amplifying first instruction, so that Claire mentioned really adequately identifying students who have special needs. And so what you want to make sure first is that first instruction is best first instruction, right? So that if a student is struggling, it's not because of a lack of strategies by the teacher or that they can't access, but rather that something's going on. So our plan this year with Millbrae was to really support your LCAP goal 2, right? Which is the Tier 1 instruction, because there was a big Wonders ELA adoption this year. And so wearing the hat I wear in Millbrae and then in this professional development role, I know the mind of a teacher. And when you have a new curriculum, you don't need a new PD coming at you. You need to immerse yourself in that curriculum. And so George Ellis, who is my co-director and also is a kindergarten teacher at Bel Air, he wears 2 hats also, he led our Wonders ELA adoption support for the elementary schools. And what that looked like was he did one session at each elementary school at a faculty meeting, where he helped the grade level teams come up with weekly routines. And what that allowed them to do was to really immerse themselves in the materials. There's tons of materials. There's a whole online component. And they worked as a team, and they came up with a weekly routine plan. And so that they did. And then what that did also was increased their collaboration, right? So they're not on their own trying to do something in their classroom. They did that as a team. And they were given, the principals gave up a couple faculty meetings to do that, and so that was really supportive. And then the second session will be addressing student needs through small group instruction and really showing where Wonders has lessons for that. And then he's also offering for the admin and a couple of teachers at each site to go and see a primary and upper grade classroom at Bel Air in action using Wonders, and specifically small group instruction, because that's hard sometimes for teachers to manage. So that's what we have going, K-5. And this year we continued training our new Taylor teachers in something called Content Area Language and Literacy. And it's a 3-day training that really looks at how do you help students access rigorous text and give students some core routines to do that. And so we had 15 teachers that had been new to Taylor in the last couple of years that we trained. And so because Millbrae is my favorite school district to work with, I decided I'll come back twice here because it's my favorite. And so we did a small group of science and math, and so we customized that, and then we did a ELA and social studies teacher one. So the text that they were using, it was really pretty customized to their assignments. The other thing that we did in August is we offered a 3-hour session on the PD day to any of the middle school teachers who were interested in coming, and it was about engaging English learners and just giving some strategies and reminding them about the changes with the new ELD framework. So that's all the work I'm doing in Millbrae this year. I think that's my last slide. So thank you so much for having me. And now you have another Julie.
Next, I'd like to introduce Julie DeMaio, who is our NGSS coach, besides being one of the teachers at Lamita Park. So she also has a dual role.
Thank you. I was going to say, continuing the dual role theme that we have going on here. Nice to see you all again. Thanks for having me out last time. It wasn't televised, but I didn't want to repeat any of the content. I am working at all levels, at all schools, on the next generation science standards. We are in our first year of a 3-year plan that Claire Vaughn and I have developed to move us forward in it. You can see from here, we are between awareness and transition, with some teachers actually moving into implementation. But you can see that there's a 4-stage component to it. Once you hit stage 3, you don't say, well, I'm doing my planning and instruction, I'm ready to go. You do that reflection piece that Julie just talked about, where you have to think, how did that go? What changes need to be made as we're learning this new thing? So we go through stage 2 and 3 in sort of a cycle as we think about our teaching. It's a reflective practice. It's not a recipe that comes out perfect every time. You think about it and how do we meet our needs. Statewide, the rollout is in year 3 of a 10-year process. So we are really well poised here as we look at the other schools on the peninsula in terms of the supports we're giving our teachers, their preparation to go forward with it. Many of the schools are still solidly in awareness, or some are still unaware, sadly. So it's really nice to say that we are transitioning towards that. I have built online supports for the teachers at all of the schools so that I'm not readily available to them. I've made connections to that new ELA Wonders program that Julie just referred to, so that they can connect that to the science standards, and it makes it easier for them to begin that. I've been working with the teachers at Taylor. I just finished a PD with the 7th and 8th grade science teachers, where they're starting to interject the NGSS standards, those new standards and changes in teaching, into their existing units, and they're ready to start looking at other changes that can be made before the end of the year even. So we're providing those daily supports, but also professional development throughout the year. I'm also representing Millbrae at county and statewide conferences, so that we're getting cutting edge information and also letting everyone know how ready we are to move forward and getting those supports from non-formal providers, from outside funders, from people at the county. So it's really nice. I've been partnering with both Julie Constantino and Debbie Connect on making that ELD science connection that is so important for our underrepresented students. That ties to the LCAP 2 that Claire referred to, so that we can start to close those gaps, so that we can get kids more engaged, bring up their vocabulary, and they will be testing better, but they'll be learning better, which is really the outcome we're hoping for. In LCAP 1, the Next Generation Science Standards is just good instruction for all students, and with teacher getting excited, seeing the engagement that their students have, we're going to see gains from everybody as well. And my work also touches on the LCAP 3 with the community partners. We have been working with parents and their involvement. What can they bring as a non-formal provider? What expertise? We're here in the heart of Silicon Valley. And so between what's happening in San Jose all the way up to Brisbane, we've got lots of support around us that we can pull in to help support our teachers with the knowledge and the content, as well as hopefully some funding going forward. So since I did my major push with you all last time, it wasn't televised. Sadly, everyone didn't get to see it all. But I just wanted to share with you where we are now with the, where we are in comparison to other schools and what's happening with NGSS on the peninsula. So thank you for your time.
And lastly, we have our elementary reading specialist, Myra Gamble, who is going to talk about what types of programs she's using for our students who are struggling readers.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity of coming to inform you about our reading program. So we have reading specialists at every school, and I'm just going to kind of give a very general overview of of how we coordinate the programs and what we do with the students. So there is a selection process of how we choose students. The students are assessed by the reading teacher, and then we decide which program best suits each student's needs and group them accordingly. The district has various programs that we've purchased to help with reading. Some of the programs are stronger in phonics, a real phonics emphasis, so some students are grouped that need real phonics, especially in the younger grades, are grouped, we use those programs with them. Some programs are stronger with vocabulary and comprehension, and some programs have a larger focus on fluency. So students are grouped using a program that meets their needs, and it might be a combination of each of these, any of these programs, or just one of these programs that focuses in one area. Students are constantly assessed. They're assessed at least once a semester, and the reading specialists do meet with teachers during parent-teacher conferences when possible. The outcomes of the assessment vary. Sometimes the student will be assessed, and we will decide a student has met grade level. They're reading at grade level, so they can graduate out of the program. And some students, we will decide to put them into a different group based on their needs. So we're always assessing and working to make sure that the students are not just stuck in one spot. They're moving around and in a program that best meets their needs. Okay, so thank you.
So that's the end of our update for our LCAP mid-year review. Were there any questions?
Don?
So this has been a topic of curious conversation around our household off and on, because our kids are going through, learning languages, different languages, now that they're at Mills. But there's always been speculation whether some languages are easier to learn if you're coming from one country or one ethnic group to another. Because we, in our family, universally agree that English, in our view, is a difficult language for people coming from other countries to learn, simply because there are so many nuances and so many inconsistencies to the English language. So, does a group that comes from one part of the world struggle more with learning English than another part of the world? Is there an answer for that? Or is that just really
I want to ask
individual?
I think it's an interesting.
You want to?
I'm not on the mic.
Yeah.
I can't talk for long enough about this on the mic. There are strategies that when you understand the native language that you can use. For example, for Spanish-speaking students, there's no stop sounds in phonics. So a stop sound would be a k, right? Is a stop sound versus a s. So there are different things that if you know as a teacher, if you know that it's a new sound, and you sort of understand some of the differences, you can accelerate the rate that they're learning kind of by understanding that. And Myra talked about phonics instruction. I mean, Drew maybe could address this also, but that some of those phonics teaching points will help depending if they're strategically used with different groups of language speakers.
I mean, obviously, if they have a different alphabet system, is probably going to be more difficult. That's what I would think, but okay.
And then I also, in my own classroom, teach academic vocabulary. And when there's a cognate, it's much easier for them. Many of our Spanish speakers do understand there's a cognate to the English word where the sounds and letters are similar and the meaning is the same. So that makes it much easier for them to grasp that as well.
So basically, it's not an easy answer for that question, but we tried. Thank you.
I just to piggyback on that, I always felt that if a child was fluent in their home language, that they would have an easier time learning the English language. So you all concur with that as well. So in that regard, how are we addressing parent ed with our English language learners? Are we, I know, Drew, you do a wonderful job with only a couple of periods, and then you go to Lomita Park. So I'm trying to figure out, we have ELD tutors at each site.
That's correct.
So are you able to support the ELD tutors in how they support the students at their site? And also, you're doing a push-in because you're in the classroom with the 5th grade students. And so you're mostly with the upper elementary kids at Lomita or at any school to get them ready for the next level at the middle school. So it must be really difficult to be able to talk to the teachers, though. I mean, you're in the classroom, and then how do you spread the good word that, your expertise?
You're right. I think since I've taken this position of ELD coordinator, I think midway through last year, I think one of our greatest needs, and I think it's just in general, it's not ours in Millbrae, but just greatest need in general is outreach to parents of that particular population. Because it really has to be outreach from us because they're not always able to come to us for the information. So I think that's something we're working on in terms of the different committees and groups we have with parents and somehow getting out to the principals and the teachers to get those parents to come to some of the informational meetings. So that's definitely something I think is a goal to improve of mine and the district, I think, for sure. In terms of pushing in and the whole and how that kind of, trying to manage all of that. It's a little bit of a combination of both. I think I have a few students in a 3rd grade classroom that I'm pulling out. It's, but again, I think you figured it out with the 2 classes I teach in the morning and then getting over to Lomita Park, it's a little tricky figuring out the scheduling. But I do have it where in the afternoons I'm with the 2 5th grade teachers, and then part of those afternoons I'll pull out some students from the primary grades. So it's a combination of working with teachers constantly through email or after, our session, but keeping close communication with those teachers is a big thing when you're pushing in. And I think that's one of the big things, too. The difference between pushing in and pulling out is we're trying to keep students in their classroom as much as possible as opposed to pulling them out. Because when obviously when you're pulling them out, they're missing the main instruction. And the whole point of, the ELD instruction is to have students have success inside the classroom that they're in. So a lot of it is communicating with the 2 teachers that I'm working with, and we're finding some success with that and working with that and seeing how we can improve that throughout the year too.
Thank you. I just have one more question for Julie. Are our new teachers buddied up with another teacher? I know we've supported buddy teachers for the new teachers. So is that happening just at Spring Valley? And
We buddied teachers up last year through the mentor teacher program. We had more teachers enrolled in induction this year, which limited the leftover funding to supply that. And so the Educator Effectiveness Grant is the source of that. And so I think I'm speaking correctly. So in a perfect world, everybody would have a buddy. And then if we couldn't have that, every new person would have a buddy. But that was the idea with trying to offer some drop-in support and also stay in close communication with those principals. So they, while my induction teachers, if they're having challenges, that's not something I'm sharing. But if a principal sees someone needs support, they're able to come to me and say, what can we do? And so we're working on that. And what has happened informally through the dedication and professionalism of our amazing veteran teachers is they do it anyway. But it would be great to stipend them, but that's kind of the status. But I appreciate you asking that because it is a difference from last year, and each year the needs they're different. Last year we had new staff that didn't necessarily require induction because induction has to be done within the first 5 years of teaching, but we still felt they were new enough to teaching that we wanted to support them. So thank you.
Thanks.
Maggie?
I do have a question. Okay, going back to tests and results, and that we didn't meet our growth that we were looking for. So speaking of discussions at home, all of our kids nowadays, they lack one thing that is they're not as social anymore between social media and texting, and they're not really speaking to each other anymore. They're just texting. So and so their form of typing is like this, not like this. So I'm just wondering, do you think that has an impact on their testing? Because I know I had a discussion with Anthony about, okay, if I have to write a paragraph in English, that's fine. But why do I have to write a sentence to describe what a math problem is? It's just a number. And so now that they have to go from adding, subtracting, to actually doing the problem and then explaining how they got that answer.
That's correct. So that's a very good question, and it's a really good point, and we are looking into that to see if there is a correlation between the keyboarding skills and the test results. Yeah. Because it is a computer adaptive test, so they do have to type in order to answer some of the questions. Some of them are short answers, some of them are essays, so they are going to need those skills. And so that is something that we're working on with our tech teachers, and we're trying to research that to see what best way we can roll out a keyboarding type of program, and we have people researching that.
Because I'm also thinking, because I'm assuming, because you said depending on your answer will give you whether the next question goes up or down.
Right.
So is the system looking for specific words or vocabulary that maybe some kids have mastered and some kids haven't? And so maybe is it something as a curriculum in the classroom, teachers can use those words in the classroom so kids are more, evenly aware of this vocabulary?
Right. So exactly, since it is a computer adaptive test, the short answers, that's how they grade the response. Is the computer is programmed with certain key words that they need to be in the response in order for them to get credit for that response. So for the short answer sections of the test. So that is something that we need to make sure that when students are answering the short answers for a text paragraph or whatever they've read, we want to make sure that they are incorporating the correct vocabulary and using those words to draw out. So these are all things that we are looking at, and since this testing is fairly new to us, we are trying to research it and analyze the data to see where we could do improvements.
Just one more thing along that line. The new testing is not timed, is that correct?
Neither testing have been timed. Students were always allowed to take as long as they needed to answer the question. Okay. So it's the same as that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Well, just one comment. We sit up here and look at numbers all the time and columns and outcomes and criteria, but to hear from the voices of the providers of these services is awesome. Really terrific. Your passion, even a little bit of nervousness in your voices tells me that you really care about the kids. And the numbers are great and the criteria have to be met, but it's you that provide the service, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Champion, would you like to take the next piece and introduce our guests for the Facilities Master Plan update?
Yes, good evening, trustees. I'd like to introduce the team from Schoolworks, Ken, Mike, and Brett. They're here tonight to discuss the progress that we've been going through so far on our facility study for our district.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you this evening. I am Ken Reynolds, president of Schoolworks, and we've been working with your staff and the community on really trying to come up with a great master plan for the district. Again, this is quite a process we go through. I've got a quick presentation for you this evening that will show you some of the highlights of the work we've done so far, and then hopefully get a little bit of feedback from you and also identify the remaining steps we have to complete this process. So again, there's several components here that we're embarking on. A lot of these steps have been done or at least been started. We still have a few remaining to get things wrapped up. So one of the key goals for tonight is share with you what we've accomplished, but also get a little bit of feedback on what some of your goals and visions are as we go through and wrap up this process and create this report. We want to make sure it meets your needs. So if there's any particular facility issues that you want to make sure we include in our analysis and in our report, we want to hear about those this evening. So our process really goes into reviewing your facilities and figuring out what the real needs are. We sort of categorize those into some common categories, really for a funding purpose analysis. So we look at modernization. What's it going to take to make sure these buildings last another 25 to 30 years? We look at additional buildings. Do we really have enough space, or do we need more buildings? And when we see some of the numbers tonight, I think we do need some more space. Our schools getting to the point where we're actually outgrowing our campuses. Do we need to look at a new school as an option? And then educational programs, right? We want to talk with, again, your leadership, find out what programs you're running. Do you have enough space for those programs? Or do we need to either remodel some existing space or build some new space to make sure your educational programs are able to meet their goals? And then, of course, after we determine, hey, here's the facility needs that we have, we want to go out there and find funding sources for those. So obviously you've used local bonds in the past. We have some information on that tonight. The state building program, we've actually used that in the past. They've got two main categories of programs. It's new construction and modernization. You've utilized the modernization program in the past, but not new construction. And actually, we believe you do qualify for some new construction funds. Just because of the number of portables you have, that doesn't count towards your capacity in some situations. And so we can get some money to help replace those with some new buildings. And finally, the other common funding sources are typically developer fees and COPs, which is basically just borrowing money against the other funding sources that are available to you. So a little update on the state building program. Prop 51 passed back in November of 2016 with a 55% yes vote, which provided $9 billion. We're going to basically be focusing on the $3 billion for new construction and the $3 billion for modernization to see how that can help you with your facilities program. There are some other programs there. The Career Tech program, that's only for high school campuses. The charter school program, that program is already oversubscribed. There were more applications turned in than funds are available. And of course, the community colleges got $2 billion out of that bond. So again, we're going to be focusing on the new construction, which the state provides 50% funding for. And that's really for growth issues and for increasing your capacity. The modernization, which is our core program we're going to be focusing on, has a 60% state funding formula, and whereas the districts are required to pay the other 40%. And that's, again, for maintaining and upgrading the buildings. Facility hardship, if we see a severe issue that's threatening the health and safety of students and staff, there's always a special program for facility hardship projects. And then financial hardship, that may be an option as we go through this plan. Again, I'm going to be looking at your newest audit report you have on your agenda this evening to see where we're at in terms of your potential opportunities. That program allows us to get up to 100% just instead of the 60% or 50% formulas. So here's a little graphic I've been using to illustrate the opportunity for funding and sort of the backlog. On this chart, we show those $3 billion bars that show the bond authority that was authorized as part of Prop 51. Below those, we're showing the projects that are already in line. The little short blue bar on each of those for new construction and modernization are projects that were actually approved and funded just in September, so just a few months ago. That was our very first bond sale of the new 2016 bond. Then all the projects in green there show all the districts that have been submitting projects that have not been funded yet. And so there's a lot of projects in line, especially when you look at the top bar for new construction, $2.2 billion worth of projects, only $800 million left for additional projects that need to be turned in. So we would need to turn a project in probably in the next 12 months if we want to make sure and still slip in that window of opportunity to be funded out of Prop 51. Whereas on the bottom section, we look at modernization, there's a lot fewer projects in line, not necessarily fewer projects, but fewer value. New construction projects are usually funded at a much larger cost than what a modernization project would cost. And so we believe as long as we turn a project in over the next 3 years, we could still get funding for a modernization project out of Prop 51. Here's another quick graphic. This shows how the state calculates enrollment projections. They have two main methodologies, a 5-year projection and a 10-year projection. And we're able to take whichever projection looks better, and that's what we would submit for our funding applications. On the 10-year projection, the state projections show that you would be growing. Again, this is a special calculation just done for new construction eligibility purposes, whereas their 5-year projection shows a decline. The key factor in the state's projections for eligibility purposes is comparing your current kindergarten class to what it was either 4 years ago or 8 years ago. And so the trend is up over a 10-year window, but over that 4-year window, our trend is actually down, and that's why these projections show different results. But it just, again, the main thing I wanted to highlight is we're able to determine the maximum and best methodology in order for when we calculate your funding opportunities. So when we looked at the growth calculations, really what the state does is it compares that enrollment projection to what your capacity is. Again, it's the state uses their own formula and their own process for determining what your school capacity is. And our calculations showed your capacity, again, based on that state formula, is about 2,429 students, whereas that enrollment projection was up about 2,600 students. So there's that difference generates that eligibility. And so for growth, again, about $7.6 million project, of which the state would provide you 50% funding. And again, I would recommend that something like that either be built for new buildings, or if we don't have the other resources to help deal with some of those portables that need to be replaced, it can also be used for that purpose. Here's the most important and funding source that we're looking at here is the state funding program for modernization. It's showing about $15 million worth of projects, of which, again, the state funds 60%. So we are looking about $9.2 million in funding, and we come up with the other $6 million. And again, unless we can find a way to get into the hardship program in which we could get up to the full $15 million in funding for your district. So again, in the past, you've been active in the state program. Between 1992 and 2000, you've had 4 projects that received state funding. So in the past, you've received about $5 million. So that in the future here, we're looking at about another $9 to $15 million. So again, even more opportunity than you've had in the past in terms of funding. And the key factor for qualifying for funding is a building needs to be 25 years old if it's a permanent building, or 20 years old if it's a portable, to qualify for state assistance. In terms of your local bond history, you've passed 2 local bonds, one in 2008 and one in 2011. They were both for $30 million each. And I did a little bit of research. Your bonding capacity is somewhere around $100 million. Again, that number gets adjusted every fiscal year. And I believe that was at the last fiscal year. We haven't taken into account the newest fiscal year's numbers yet. And again, as of the last audit report, I haven't reviewed tonight's yet, there was about $44 million in unused capacity when you compared what you've sold from those bonds versus your total legal bonding capacity. You need to be at 60% of your bonding capacity, which would represent $60 million in debt. And so if we only had $40 million left, right, we'd be right at that 60% level. And so if we're at that 60% level or over, that's when we can ask for hardship funding for 100% funding of your state-funded projects. So if we incur a little bit more debt, either through bonds or through COPs, then we can meet the hardship requirement. So that's something we're going to study as we go through this master planning process. We've completed a demographic study and looked at your enrollment projections. We use a GIS system and computerize all of the information about your district, so where students live over the last several years, what your school boundaries are. We're in the middle now of putting actually your school facilities into our system so we know the square footages, the date built, the date they were modernized, and have a great inventory of all that data so we can start modeling some options for the district. When we looked at the enrollment projections, this chart shows a 10-year history and what we believe the next 6 years looks like. The only thing we haven't factored in here yet is some new development factors. Again, we've worked with the city. We've got some data coming in. They're a little short-staffed, and we don't have all the exact details that we want yet. I believe your projections will increase a little bit above this, perhaps another 77 students over what we're projecting, just based on our initial estimates we've had so far. But so some slight slow growth is what we're actually projecting over the next 6 years currently. This chart here shows a little bit of data about the data behind the scenes. These green bars represent this school year we're in and how many kids are in each grade level. So we can see if we've got some bubbles in certain grades or some lower classes. Of course, our incoming kindergarten this year was smaller. That's why we saw that state 5-year projection drop low. We do have some larger classes, especially in some of the upper grades. The blue line on here represents how many kids were in that class when they started kindergarten. So as you can see, most of our enrollments in each grade level currently are larger than back when those kids started kindergarten several years ago. And so that just tells us over time, our classes are growing in size. So the impacts of families moving in and moving out creates an increase in your enrollment over compared to when they started school with you. And then this one is really just comparing our schools so we can understand that not all schools are the same. Some are larger and smaller than others. So here we can see the size variation is not dramatic, but there are some variations there. And of course, our smallest school enrollment was at Lomita Park. And the average school is running around 400 students or so. Here's where we sort of compare and look at some of the issues in terms of our growth and our demographics. This compares our school classroom counts, and based on those classroom counts and the district's loading standards, how many students we put in each classroom, we've calculated a capacity. We compare that capacity to our enrollment and our enrollment projection to determine, do we have enough space? What's our utilization factor? And we've highlighted in red here the Spring Valley campus because our calculations show we're overcrowded on that site. And so, again, we haven't finished all of our facility data analysis yet, but that's our one biggest concern. But you look at all these numbers, we're in the 90 percentile. Anytime I see a school operating at about 90% or higher, we know things are challenging. If the wrong kid shows up at the wrong grade level, there's no room for them on that campus. And so we're having to shift them to a neighboring school. So again, those are the types of issues that we're trying to study and analyze here and make sure we come up with a vision and a master plan that addresses all the various issues. So again, we've been on the sites, we've observed the conditions, we've met with your staff and got input from them, and we've done an online survey and gotten input from, again, the teachers and the community. So based on that, again, there's always traffic issues, parking, circulation, right, dropping kids off, picking them up. There's some HVAC, that's our heating and air conditioning issues that need to be addressed. There's always electrical power system issues, especially with the newest technology and all the power we need for technology. Plumbing and underground utilities. When we have schools that are as old as the schools in this region of the state, right, things get old and they need to be replaced and repaired. So again, all these types of issues we're studying. We're going to develop a cost list, see what it's going to cost to address these types of issues. And in some cases, we might not need to fix something if we can replace it. So again, those are all the different options we're going to be studying for you. When we looked at the community survey, a lot of the same issues popped up there. So it's when we're seeing the same thing that the community understands, that's great because we're on the same page. And so again, we heard about safety and security, right? That's just a popular issue throughout the state and the nation. Technology, new libraries, media centers, and what is the future of our libraries and media centers? We've seen a lot of interesting designs out there, so it'd be great to hear some feedback on what your vision is for the future of those types of spaces. Kindergarten play spaces, dedicated small group spaces, and again, we've heard a lot about some of the special programs that operate either through the push-in and pull-out, making sure there's adequate space for those teachers and those programs. So again, we're going to be incorporating and analyzing all this data, coming back to you with some different options on different ways to meet these items and which funding sources from the state and other local sources can be used for each of these types of items to develop an implementation plan. But the bottom line is, right, our needs list is probably going to exceed our funding list, and so then we can come back to you with some different options, right? Do we try to raise additional funds, or do we just try to limit our list to what we can afford? And again, those different options will also be bringing forward for your consideration. When we looked at what our next steps are, again, we're going to finalize our development projections and working with the city. We're finishing the computerization of our facility inventory so we can update and finalize our analysis there, make sure we, our cafeteria is large enough. Do we have enough library space? Do we need some extra types of, do we have enough restrooms? And all those types of issues are being analyzed as part of that process. We'll, again, develop that cost list, and we'll compare those needs to our funding sources. And then, again, that's really where the challenge comes into play is, what's it going to take to address all of our needs, or are there some needs that are a higher priority than others? And then with that, after we've, again, had more meetings with you, with the community, with the staff, and the site staff and the district staff, then we will be able to come back finally to you with a draft master plan that really outlines what our overall timeline for projects will be and what our proposed funding sources are. So with that, I'd really love to hear just a few minutes of feedback on what some of your goals and objectives are as we go through this process.
Maggie, yeah, anything?
I don't have anything specific, but obviously our cafeterias are too small. I don't know, ideally it would be nice to have science labs. It would be nice to have, I don't know, just upgrade computer labs, more of the connections and all that stuff. I think that's what is really needed. And of course the libraries are not your usual traditional libraries anymore. They're more the high-tech, more of a, hangout area where there's fewer books and more computers. And I don't know, it's just stuff. Just something just came to mind. Yeah.
Don?
So I'm very interested in, your feeling that we might qualify for some additional funding to, if I remember correctly, it's the modernization piece that we could be leveraging better. Would that be correct? So, we're on a window of time. So we said 12 months is that really we should be submitting our proposal. Would that be correct?
The 12 months applies to the new construction program.
New construction, okay.
So if we had any new buildings we identify as part of our study, we're going to want to get the architect involved to get a project designed and turned in the next 12 months. Modernization, we have more time available, but still, the sooner we get in line, the sooner we can access funding. And so time is always a critical factor.
Okay, so these are shared costs unless we qualify for hardship, correct?
Correct.
So I guess the question I would pose to our CBO is, if we're only in a 60-40 scenario, and we're talking $15 million, and the state's going to come up with $9 million. Yeah, do we have the $6 million so that we can take advantage of it? Yeah.
Well, if you recall, we still have some facility money left over from a sale of asset from a number of years ago, around 11 or $12 million that are sitting in Fund 40 as reserved out for these particular projects that are going to be part of their calculations. So I think I don't want to just limit us to $15 million is what our needs are. I think our needs are going to exceed that. So that's what their job is, to come back with from the surveys, figure out what we actually need critical, what we would like to have, and what we wish to have, and then really see what we can afford and go after and try to fund a funding source for our share. And then obviously we're going to have to, we're not going to be able to afford everything, so we're going to have to really prioritize what is critical as we go forward.
So the most we can get from the state is $15 million. But if our facility report shows that we need $40 million, so we're talking about possibly going for a bond to cover the rest of that. Is that how it is? Or how does that? Let's say you come in and you say you need $40 million. $15 million is not going to cover it. So
and said, we're going to provide different options and show you different ways in which you can raise those funds, because if we had that much need and we knew we had to go after some more debt in order to meet that, whether it's a local bond or a borrowing, then if we know we're going to incur more debt, then we know we can actually ask the state for the full 15 million instead of just the 9 million. And so again, it's just part of the options that we're going to study. Whereas if we know that additional debt is not an option for this district, then we know that we can only count on that 9 million, right? Then it just provides it's a different scenario that we'll study. And so again, we don't know what scenario is going to be best yet, because we still have to finish analyzing the data and coming up with a cost list. But those are just some of the work that we will be doing on behalf of the district.
Okay. Just a quick question. So let's say you walk into a school and you look at the cafeteria, you look at the number of students, and you say, oh my God, this cafeteria is not big enough. So what are we looking at? I mean, are you looking new construction, like tearing things down and building new cafeteria? Or, I mean, how do you come up with what the modernization is? Like, does that make sense? I don't know.
Yes, and it's really, there's two options. Well, there's three options. One is we can lower the number of students on campus, right?
Okay.
If the school was overcrowded and we were building a new school, or we can change a boundary, right? That's one scenario that we've dealt with in the past in some of our clients. Another is sometimes that building is expandable. If we can expand that building, again, we're going to have to take a look at it, at the engineering, at the architecturally, at the layout on the campus to see if that even makes sense. Sometimes that's just not possible. And then the other option is to build a brand new building. Now, whether it's built in that same place or we build it somewhere else on campus, again, we're going to look at the campus layout and see if there's even space on that site for a brand new, larger cafeteria. And then we get to decide what to do with the old cafeteria. Does it become your new library and media center, or is it used for some other purpose? Or is it something that's in such bad condition that we truly want to remove it from the site? So those are all the different types of scenarios we can look at.
Okay.
So obviously, different schools have different needs. And so at what point do you look at a general, like, infrastructure? Because I would think that infrastructure would be something that would be necessary at all the sites. Or do you go to the site that is in more dire need? Or how does the district, I guess that's a district decision to make, how we're going to prioritize what things we're going to address. Is that?
Yeah, you'll get to prioritize, but we will make recommendations, again, based on our experience and our expertise. So we'll help guide you through that, but ultimately, you make the decisions.
I was going to ask you, do you have expertise in looking at regional funding? For example, I see traffic, parking controls. Sometimes that's considered a local issue, but oftentimes there are agencies within the county or the region that might help address that kind of need in a facility report.
We have worked with, again, lots of other types of local agencies on different types of funding options. So it's not just state. Sometimes there's federal grants. Sometimes there are other local opportunities. We've done a lot of joint venture type projects where we're working with the cities and other organizations. So yeah, we're always keeping our eye out for opportunities. One of the key ones we're thinking will hopefully come around soon. I was just reading the governor's budget today too, seeing if there's any new opportunities there. But we're seeing security as a new issue throughout, I said, the nation and our state. And so we're wondering if some new grant will come along to help with some of those costs. But yeah, so yeah, we can definitely reach out if there's a particular entity that you know of that we should be reaching out to. Great. Otherwise, we do normally try to find out what other options are available.
Yep. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 6.3, update on parcel tax survey. Ron, do you want to introduce Brian?
Trustees, if I can invite up Brian Godby from Godby Research.
Thank you, Vaughn. Mr. President, members of the board, I'm Brian Godby, and I'm here to give you a briefing on our recent survey on the feasibility of putting a parcel tax measure on the ballot. As you know, the district had several objectives. One was to assess potential support for a parcel tax measure. We wanted to look at a variety of projects and programs that we might spend the money on. We also looked at some informational and critical statements, as well as the wealth of demographic information and behavioral characteristics about those respondents. In terms of the methodology more specifically, the world has changed, of course, as it had in our last survey in early 2017 for the district. We're now calling landlines, calling cell phones, texting, which is actually new to you, texting messages to get people to do a survey on their device, whether that be a phone or a tablet, as well as emailing, where we have email addresses to an online survey on people's computers, one assumes, but that could still be on a phone or on a tablet. The universe then of likely voters in November 2018 with a subset of those in June 18. These are slightly larger universes than we looked at the last time around, and that was a decision that we made in consultation with TBWB because of the interest in the gubernatorial race. There's 9 Democratic candidates right now. Not all of them are tested in the polling, and a handful of Republicans as well. So it's going to be quite an interesting gubernatorial year. We were in the field in mid-November through November 18th. The average phone survey was 12 minutes long. We don't know how long all the online surveys take because people can walk away from it. They can put their phone down. They can answer a phone call on their phone and come back to it. But what we do know is that we've been successful in having people complete the surveys 24 hours a day. We could obviously never call them 24 hours, but with the email invitation and the text invitation, it's entirely up to them when they take the survey, which is great. That gave us a sample size of 289 likely November voters and 251 likely June voters, which is the subset. The June is always a smaller turnout in this particular election year. It gives us an error rate of 5.7 in round numbers for the November 18 or 6.04, 6% for June. Since this was a shorter survey, we went right into the ballot questions. We didn't have climate questions like we did the last time we surveyed. And as we've done before, we asked people the ballot question, which you see in the box on the right-hand side of the slide, and then ask, would you vote definitely yes, probably no, or definitely no, or there's a don't know category as well. For feasibility purposes, it has always been our practice to add the definitely yes and the probably yes together. And so that's what we've done in this slide. And you can see in the June universe, we are at 66.5. So that's right where we need to be, obviously, to be successful. Actually, it's right beneath where we need to be. We need to be at 66.7, but statistically, we're right at that point. In the November universe, we're at 71% in round numbers, so we're a little above that. But if you apply the error rate to those, we could be higher, but we could also be lower in both cases than the 2/3 requirement that we need to be successful. The next set of questions shown on this slide is the features of the measure. So these are the things that we would spend the money on. They are parts of the ballot question that we've already shown people. But what we're asking here is for individually people to respond to the item and then tell us if they'd be much more likely, somewhat less likely, or much less likely to support the measure based on that particular feature. We then go back and assign numeric values when we're doing our data processing and analysis, such that a much more likely is a 2, a somewhat more likely is a 1, a somewhat less likely is a -1, and a much less likely is a -2. That gives us this scale that you see here, which really ranges from a +2 all the way down to a -2. The good news is everything's positive here. The reason we do this particular scale rather than just adding percentages and showing you percentages alone together is you could have an item that was 40% much more likely and 30% somewhat more likely. That's 70%. You could also have another item that it was the reverse, 30% much more likely and 40% somewhat more likely. That's also 70%, but it's not the same 70%. So that intensity difference is what's really highlighted in this particular analysis. We then also look at the percentages as well. That's useful to give you some context. So you see both of those in these slides. Additionally, we also look at a statistical analysis which sort of groups the items together, and that's what you see represented by the tiers. So a tier is a 0.2 difference from high to low. The things in there, while numerically different, are statistically tied, so they're grouped together. Our top group then is maintain 21st century hands-on science labs, technology, engineering, and math instruction. That was our first bullet in the ballot question as well. Attract and retain qualified teachers is second. That actually was our third bullet in the ballot question, so that's maybe a little higher, and we could revise the ballot question. Strengthening reading and writing programs was third. On this set of questions. It was second in our ballot question, so that's the two things that we might flip around. Provide hands-on science labs is not something that's in our ballot question. It's something that we could add. It is in fourth position in this particular scale. And then finally, we have restore art and music programs at the bottom. Again, all of those are clustered together from a statistical perspective. There are numeric differences, and at the end of the day, you've got to make a decision on what to put first and what to put second in your ballot question, and using the numeric rating, even though it may not be statistically different, is as good as any approach to that. At the bottom of the list, and still positive, we have fun classroom computers and instructional technology. All of those items range from, you can see 78% as a high, at least somewhat more likely, down to 69%. So they're all at or above the 2/3 threshold that we need to be at to be successful. The next set of questions, the methodology is largely the same, although the scale is slightly different. And this is informational items. These are positive arguments, basically. The difference in the methodology you can see in the chart itself, there's no negative side of the equation, and that's because it just doesn't make, when people hear these kinds of statements, it doesn't make sense that they would be less likely, so it always confuses respondents. So years ago, we eliminated the negative side of the equation, and we just have much more likely, somewhat more likely, no effect with the scores that you see there. It works just the same as the previous question, but what it really means is you just can't compare these scores apples to apples with the previous set of questions. You can still use it to rank them, and that's what we've done here. At the top of this list in our first tier is this measure helps teachers provide 21st century instruction in science, technology, engineering, and math, so the STEM argument. At 1.27, that's about 71%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. All of the money raised by this money will be controlled locally, go to local schools, and cannot be taken by the state, is what is behind the ellipses there. At 1.25, virtually the same level. None of the money will be used for administrator salaries. In third place, studies show that well-rounded education, including art, music, PE classes, make students better prepared to be successful. The district is among those with the lowest per-student funding in the county. The measure will require independent citizens' oversight and audits at 1.15. And then finally, in the top tiers, senior citizens, many of whom are on fixed incomes, will be exempt from the measure. These range from that 1.27, or about 71%, at least somewhat more likely, down to 1.07, or about 65%, at least somewhat more likely. So the very last item about seniors, it's positive, and it's almost to the 2/3 level, but it's not quite. Now, obviously, that speaks to seniors. So with seniors, it's much more important than it is with 30-somethings, and that's probably why you see it being below the 2/3 level. So at this point in the survey, we've given them a list of things we're going to spend the money on. We've given them some informational statements that are positive, and we come back to our ballot questions a second time. And what you see here in a kind of busy chart is that the support level has gone up, and that's what we'd expect to see. For the June environment, we've gone from 66.5 to 70.8, so about 4.3% increase. And for November, we've gone from 70.9 to 75.9, so a 5% increase. And certainly covers the error rate that we were talking about earlier, so that's the most encouraging number here. But since both of them go up, that's what we would expect, and that's good news. Then next we go to a list of critical statements, so these are negative arguments, and the methodology is the same as what we saw for the informational statements. We don't put a minus sign in front of the numbers to make it seem bad. The higher it is, the worse it is. And so the way to interpret it is it's at least somewhat more likely to oppose the measure. In our top tier, we have some say the district has hidden funds they received from the sale of property. They should not use that money before asking voters to for tax increases at point.
Can we advance the slide?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be better, wouldn't it? Oops, wrong way. There we go. I'm sorry. There we go. So first one I read. Second one is we already pay too much in taxes, which is a pretty typical anti-tax argument. Now the city and the county want to raise taxes for a new recreation center and to reduce traffic. Enough is enough at 0.9. If the school district managed its budget more efficiently, we wouldn't have to pay more in taxes. Again, a fairly typical anti-tax argument. And then finally, last year, the state passed a $9 billion measure. Why do we need a local tax too? Ranging from 0.92 to 0.75, all of those, and even the one in the second tier, are above the 1/3 plus 1 necessary to defeat a measure like this. So they're reasonably impactful, and we need to be aware of that and be prepared to answer these challenges should they come up. So at this point, we have now talked about the ballot question, we've talked about the positives, we've talked about what we'd spend the money on, and we've talked about the negatives. We've sort of simulated what goes on in the real world. So we go to a next test of the ballot question, again, same wording as the first and the second ones, and we're looking to see what happens after people have heard everything. And what you immediately see is that we go down a little bit. That's not surprising. They've just heard all the negatives. So for June in our final test, we're at 63.9, and for November, we're at 69.6. Maybe a fairer way, I mean, the methodology is very intentional because we want to see what happens on the upside, we want to see what happens on the downside. That's not exactly what happens in the real world because you might hear the positives first for some people and then the negatives, and other people might hear the negatives first and then the positives. And you got to hear one right before you vote at the end of the day. Hopefully it's positives, but we can never control that. So another way of looking at this would be to average the second and third tests, in which case in June you get to 67.4, and in November you get to 72.8. Now that number's not on here, just doing the math from the previous slides. But clearly November has exceeded the 2/3 threshold in all of the tests. That's not the case for June. So the survey revealed that there continues to be a solid base of support, as there was in the survey we did back in early 2017. Support for the June measure is at 66.5, 67 or 70.8, sorry, and 63.9. So one of the three tests, it exceeds the 2/3 that we need to be successful. While numerically higher, but not statistically different, the November election is 70.9, 75.9, and 69.6. And that point really that there is no statistical difference between the two of these because we've got a 5.5, 6% error rate, and that applies plus and minus for both surveys. So you've got to add those together to see a difference, and clearly we don't see that much difference between these two. So it is not a statistically significant difference between June and November, but November does achieve the 2/3 margin on all of the tests. And as such, the November election presents a lower risk option than the June election. The reverse, obviously, is that the June, it would be a higher risk option, and there's more work to be done. I mean, there's work to be done in both of them, for sure, but obviously June would require a really a well-executed effort to make up the difference that we have to start with, as well as to keep people on board, as you'd have to in the November scenario. The top tier features, again, maintaining 21st century hands-on science labs, technology, STEM, basically, attracting and retaining teachers, strengthening reading and writing programs, providing hands-on science labs, restoring art and music programs. The informational statements that voters are keen to know about. The measure provides those 21st century teacher instruction in science, technology, engineering, and math to prepare children for high school and college and the global economy. All the money raised will be controlled locally and can't be taken by the state. None of the money will go to administrators, and that studies show that a well-rounded education is helpful. The district is among the lowest funded in the county, and the measure does require that independent citizens oversight as well as having a senior exemption. So given all the survey data, TBWB and Godby Research recommend that the district does continue to prepare for a 2018 election, and that the next step really is to absorb the data, and then another presentation and discussion and analysis of the climate and the readiness of a potential campaign, independent campaign, obviously, and to make it a decision based on that information at a subsequent board meeting. Certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point.
Anyone have questions on this? Brian, thank you very much. You've given us a lot of data to look at. I appreciate your professional presentation, and I think our next step is really to take all of this under advisement and discuss it as a board and in public, so that we can make some rational decisions in the near future, because the calendar is moving along, and I think if we're going to do something in 2018, this is the time to make that move. So I thank you for your information tonight.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're on to district business. 7.1, the 2016-17 audit report. Rick, can I ask you to introduce that?
President Fama, the auditor is running late. He just texted, so I'd like to move this item to the end of our agenda tonight. Okay. He's on his way, but he's stuck in traffic. All
right.
You know how that goes around here.
Item 7.2, resolution 17-1805, annual accounting of development fees for 2016.
Trustees, resolution 17-1805 is our annual accounting for development fees. It's a recommended board action for approval. It's presented tonight.
Okay. So this is an action item. I will entertain a motion to approve. Do I have a?
So,
Trustee Musa made the motion.
second.
Second, Trustee Ferrario. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes. Item 7.3, approval of revised job description, attendance secretary 2 for the middle school.
Yes. Trustees, we're excited to bring for approval our revised job description for attendance secretary 2 at the middle school. This is a recommended action for approval.
May I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Trustee Ferrario, motion.
Second.
Second, Trustee Rebello. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. It is time now for committee reports. Budget Advisory Committee.
Trustees, there's no action, there's no report for tonight's board meeting, except that the Budget Committee will be meeting again Soon we'll be sending out our agenda, but we are looking for new members to add to our current stable of members. And the superintendent and I and our director of supervisor of business will be attending the governor's release on Tuesday, which we'll report out at our upcoming board meeting in February. But there is no communication for tonight to report for the Budget Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you. Communications to the board. Speakers wishing to address the board on items on the agenda may complete speakers cards and submit them to the board secretary. Speakers addressing specific items on the agenda will have an opportunity to address the board at the time of the agenda item in the meeting. If you are addressing the board on a non-agenda item, please be aware that the provisions of the Brown Act prohibit the board from acting or discussing on such matters at this meeting. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person per topic. MEA, do we have anyone from MEA? Seeing nobody. CSEA, seeing no one. MEF, seeing no one. Members of the community, except for us, seeing no one. So we will close communication to the board. Trustee communications. Don, can I start with you tonight?
Certainly. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the new year. I think we're entering 2018 with a sense of optimism that we haven't always entered every year with. It's nice seeing the culmination of a lot of years of hard work and effort by the community as a whole. And, certainly we witnessed in 2017 a coming together of support for the community that I was very, very proud to see. When we look back just a short period of time, what it was like trying to get consensus or, mutual support of the concept of equity to what we have now, it's truly great to see. So I think, the community as a whole is moving in the right direction. It's something to be certainly optimistic about, but it's certainly, I think, something we in the community need to continue to leverage, because I don't think we're anywhere near approaching what the true potential of our community is to support our schools and support our children and support the future of the community. So I think it behooves all of us to continue doing what we've been doing, getting other people involved, because that's been critical. Getting as many people from different sides to sit together, because it's when we do that I think we really see, the understanding, the increased level of understanding that's made the progress to this point possible. So I would look forward to that in the coming year. Looking forward to all of us working that much more closely together.
Trustee Ferrario.
I'll be brief. Again, Happy New Year to everyone and welcome back to our staff. It seems like we have been on break for such a long time, but not for everyone. So I know our district office has been busy working over the break, and so appreciate all your hard work. Happy to know that Trustee Barbaro is improving so much every day, and I'm looking forward to seeing him and having him back on our team, hopefully next month. So with that, I'll just pass the mic on to Trustee Musa.
Okay, well, I agree with you, Dawn, with the transitioning that we had in 2017. I feel like with our 2019, we'll continue the work. But personally, sorry, I started my 2018 by cleaning out closets. I'm going through my own tradition at home because I just realized I don't have a baby anymore. I don't have an elementary kid. And so I went through Anthony's stuff and all that baby stuff and books and clothes and everything that he inherited from his older brothers. And so anyway, I cleaned out a lot of baggage. Anyway, so I feel much better to move on with our 2018 school year. Anyway, that's fine. Anyway, and then I just want to say I'm looking forward to the MEF Gala. It's coming up February 24th. Buy your ticket soon because the buzz is around and everybody's calling and saying, trying to take the VIP tables and trying to go as groups. So it should be a fun event. So get your tickets soon. That's it.
So with just over 300 days until Christmas, I think it's a demonstration of how quickly the year passes by. And I want to commend our, in absentia, our former president of the board, Frank Barbaro, who will be returning to us, I believe, in February. He's going to shoot for that date. He's such a quiet leader, and I think this year has been extremely successful for a number of reasons. But I think it's because this has all occurred under his watch, he deserves a great deal of credit for bringing us all together. We have a terrific board. Maggie has been a wonderful addition since she's been with us. Our administrative team, our principals, teachers, staff, everybody involved has been just terrific in terms of cooperation. Our collaboration with community groups and with the city continues to grow. And if I had one wish, it's that would continue to grow. We're going to have many challenges with the city and the parks and the school district. We all have agendas. We all have things we have to get done this year. But I truly believe that by working together, we're going to build a better community. And as I've always said, we are responsible for the quality of life in Millbrae. And so I want to continue that mission with this fabulous board. So welcome back. Okay. So now it is time for our superintendent's report. Vaughn?
All right, good evening, trustees. Kind of a quick update, but I had a chance to work with our principals today to get some of the highlights from their campus, just to recap what happened before we left for the break. But Happy New Year, everybody, and here's my update. We want to give a shout out to the Millbrae Lions. One of their projects, just to update the board, was to do a holiday gift program. And they were able to donate 80 $50 gift cards to our sites and our elementary sites. And the Millbrae Lions Elves, led by Jan Rao, visited every campus to give gift cards to families who were in need. And our principals did a great job of accepting on behalf of the district and was able to do a pick from the bag system. And so that was a very, very special treat from the Lions, and we thank them for their continued partnership. Going from alphabetically, at Green Hills School, Mr. Fong wanted to share, highlighting goal 1, that they are implementing VAPA, Visual Performing Arts, through the LEAP program, and that's in hopes that we will spread that across to every campus. But for Green Hills, they're looking at K1 participating in the Creative Movement unit, and then grades 2 and 3 will be learning hip-hop dance, and grade 4 and 5 will be doing architecture, mini units. At Lamita Park, same. They have implemented and will be implementing the LEAP program, Spotlight on K1, looking at the visual arts education. 2-3 is participating in the Latino Afro-Brazilian dance education. And 4-5, they're participating in the hip-hop dance education. Exciting stuff. So, trustees, if you have an opportunity to visit these campuses, that's what you'll see. At Meadows, LCAP Goal 2, our principal wanted to highlight their continued work in the support of all learners. We know that Meadows' leadership team meets regularly to develop and monitor student emotional and social academic process. It's a continued process for their sites. Certainly, we want to continue the partnership of the special education students in the general education setting. And so shout out to Meadows in terms of highlighting that work. At Spring Valley, she wanted to highlight her goal, LCAP Goal 2. Trustee Ferrario had asked a little bit about parent involvement. Outside of the PTA-sponsored parent education night, as you know, Spring Valley continued the Parent 101. And so now they are extending to invite special panel discussions from the mental health professional at Stanford. And so look forward to that. All parents are encouraged to attend and are invited. They have a Power of One assembly for students in February that addresses bullying, exclusion, and responsible use of social media. That's for students in the month of February, I believe. And lastly, to continue the work of our PBIS, which you've heard in terms of Taylor Middle School implementing. So are two of our other sites at Spring Valley Elementary. It's a participation with the county. They have a leadership team that will be rolling that out in both January and February. And at Taylor Middle School, exciting things that are happening. Taylor Middle School will begin their English language arts pilot of the Amplify curriculum. It is a computer-based one-to-one technology component, so our fingers are crossed that our bandwidth withholds and that it is a successful launch, and we don't want that to be a factor. And I know that under the leadership of Claire Beltrami, our assistant soup, she's working with our technology team to craft and to ensure that there is district technology support, because we want that to be the last factor that our teachers refer to in terms of a program rollout. Taylor is also piloting a math pilot of the college preparatory math and illustrative math program beginning January 16th. Just a little component to this. Taylor Middle School has yet to adopt a math program. They've done a really great job of continuing the work of bridging the old math curriculum to supplemental materials that support Common Core state standards. And so we wanted to bring forth items that were approved by the state or go through the process that we'll bring to the board should the math team and the committee make that recommendation. Also, Taylor Middle School, with our one Spanish teacher, piloted a program, world language pilot, and it is ready to be present to the board for a full adoption for 2018-2019. And I do know that there was a collaboration that took place with the middle school and the high school to ensure that there is transition from what they're learning in Spanish 1-2 to Spanish 1-2 in high school. So that is an awesome partnership. And lastly, by the start of 18-19, there will be fully adopted PE, Spanish, math, and ELA, and by 1920, science and social studies will be added and hopefully fully adopted as well. This is a reminder to our community that we are gearing up for 2018-19. We have our priority registration window for January 24th through February 23rd, 2018. Information is listed on our website. Families are to contact the sites for appointments. Registration is only by appointments. If families are walking into the school offices without appointments, if there is time available for that day, if there are no appointments, our families will be taken. But we do encourage our new families and families of folks who are new to not only the districts, but if you have a new kinder or a new TK, that is the registration period, and appointments should be made with the school sites prior to bringing the paperwork. We have our, remember, this is our 4th annual TK Kinder panel event. It seemed like just yesterday that we started this for the very first time, but we encourage our brand new families and families to the district focusing on TK and Kinder. We do have Mrs. Gruno from Meadows Elementary who will be joining the panel. Principals, district office staff. We have our MEF president. We have our PTA council president. And certainly I extend an invite to a trustee for that evening as well. It is on Monday, January 22nd at Taylor Auditorium at 6 p.m. Light refreshments from our food services will be there. And so I invite families to attend for a very informational night, as well as learn some tidbits from some of the guests that will be there. Some exciting news from Taylor Middle School. This is a shout out to our admin team. They're hosting their first Taylor Middle School Science Fair. This is an extension from the county's science fair, and the rubric and how we plan to judge the projects that are submitted mirrors the metrics from what the county looks for. This is on January 30th from 4 to 7 at the Shea Center. Just some items that you may see, from junk to funk to food science projects, and 3D printing. And so looks like it's going to be an exciting evening. One of the things that I'm going to ask and send out to the trustees is our principal is looking for judges. And so if you are available, the judging will take place on Friday, January 26th from 3 to 4:30. We have district administration possibly. We have some key staff members from Taylor. If you are able, trustees, please just shoot me an email or let me know, and I'll forward that information to Mr. Hophan, because judging will take place. It's strategic and it's through a metric system, and so it's calibrated through the county's work. So if you're interested and if you're available, please let me know. Lastly, just some looking ahead items. Certainly, our campuses are closed for the MLK Junior holiday on Monday. We have our joint City Council and Millbrae School District board meeting, joint meeting on January 18th at 7:30. It will take place at our district office in room H7. Once again, on January 22nd, our TK panel. We come back again for January 23rd for our regular board meeting. Trustee Ferrario, January 29th is our homework committee meeting at 3:15. Just to give a highlight, we sent out a homework survey to parents and to our teachers, and within I would say an hour or so, we had about 250 parents respond. It was during the holidays, and so it was right before we came back. I think that they were either bored or ready to send kids back to school. So that information will be shared, and we will bring that back to the board as highlight as well. And lastly, January 30th, once again, is our Science Fair at Taylor. That is my update for tonight. Any questions or comments?
On the judging on January 26th, I was going to suggest that we reach out to some community people to participate, some of our supporters, Peninsula Chinese Business Association, Lions Club, the Rotary, get those people involved as well.
Certainly.
How many trustees do you need? How many can you have?
How many trustees? At this point, it was an initial, the email came out this morning, I believe, requesting district office staff, if you're available, please, we need judges. And Mr. Hophan did say, please extend this to all trustees. And so at this point, the more the merrier, because it is through a metric system. Cool.
Thank you. We now have the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Ravello, seconded by Trustee Russo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Finally, governance, not finally, but number 13. I have a few prepared remarks. Governance and board policy, the first reading of our community relations use of school facilities. Rick?
Good evening, trustees. Again, I know it's kind of hard to get excited about reading about board policy and AR updates, but I'm pretty excited about this because President Fama, as you stated, one of our missions is to continue our growth in our community outreach. And renting our facilities is a positive step in that process as we expand our facilities that are wonderful facilities that we spent lots of taxpayer dollars on in the last two bond offerings. It's time now, and I've been saying this, that we are open for business, and district staff has made that a priority as we're going through this. And this is just one of the steps that we need to go through in that process, in that journey. The first step was we automated our registration system. In the old system, it was pencil and paper, fax, and updates, and callbacks, and various things. Using civic permits now has really automated that process, really has made it a lot more efficient now with one sets up at their own account all the information and docs that we require as a school district, the certificates of insurance and contact information and such, is all created one time. And that system monitors the expirations of those documents, so it really takes the risk off our personnel to track that kind of stuff, which is a positive to our district. And also, too, it emails, and there's a process that it goes through that's in this first reading tonight that you'll take and read through, and we'll bring back at our next board meeting for a second reading, and eventually in our February meeting for approval. But there's a process that it goes through approval, making sure the sites know, making sure our facility supervisors know, making sure our food supervisor knows if it's applicable to that reservation. And it gets it on a Google Calendar that is shared for any of the public, anyone that wants to see, anyone within the district. It's really a great way to go. So excited about step one, check. It's still a learning curve. It's still 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but at least we're going in the right direction. Tonight, you have a variety of information on BP 1330 and AR 1330, which is basically incorporating and updating the canned version of the facilities use agreement that we had from Gamut and that we've had in the past. It's incorporating Ed Code 3830130 and a new Senate Bill 1404, which basically allows us to recapture some of our hard costs to maintain these facilities, and also set up, this is my word, this is the county word, a sinking fund to replenish those assets from the fees that are generated. So we're trying to recapture our direct operating costs, which basically we know is our custodial costs, our admin costs, our supplies, what it costs just to operate that facility. So we do recap those. And also a capital direct cost, which basically is a dollar amount that comes from that calculation and goes into Fund 40, which, as you know, is a reserved account for facilities. So over time, I know it's not going to, it'll be one of the spokes in the wheels as we go, and we just accumulate that money. So it is reserved out of our general fund for facility use only for the future. So I call it a sinking fund, but there's lots of different ways you can call it. So, and that's been a comment from some of our facility studies. Are you guys planning for the future? So this is one avenue of planning for the future. We've expanded, let me pull up my notes here as I'm trying to just talk as we wait for our CPA to come in. Some of the key updates is basically clarifying the language to reflect the needs of the district and the student, and also the current law. Make sure that's number one, is our priority use is protected. It establishes a priority of users. So you'll see through there's users that are obviously the school district comes first. And then our contracted facility tenants are second, and so on. There's a process. So if someone has a question, why can't I get the same facility as another group? Well, here is where your user, here's your definition is. This is how you fall in. we are expanding the category of fees, which we're not going to discuss tonight because after we go through the fee calculation will be our third step in this process. And it basically, we were going to have 4 categories of fees, and it'll vary from just a small direct cost for our PTAs, PTOs, MIF to an expanding in variety of different fees as we go down. But fair fees based upon our direct costs and our capital cost structure. It has to be that way. Of course, now I'm trying to stall a little bit more as we go through here. I'll just repeat from the start of the night. But that's the process. That's what you see in front of you. Attached is a clean copy, a red line copy which shows changes, and our current board policy in AR the way it's stated right now.
Speaking of fees, did we revise our fee schedule yet, or is this work in process?
Step 3. We're on step 2 because I want to make sure that we approve the categories. We're expanding from 2 to 4, and our priority users because that'll go into our fee calculation. And also, too, we'll be following the CDE, the California Department of Education's fee calculator. Not so much as market rate, because we as a school district can't go with what the market is, except for our 4th category, which is our nonprofits, our for-profit people that come in. But so we'll be discussing that March, April, ready for the summertime or the new school year.
I have to say, I walked by the Shea Center the other night, and there was basketball going on. And I can remember walking by there many times on my way to meetings or whatever, and it'd be kind of dark, or there'd be kids doing homework. It looked like a high school gym. I mean, it was really spiffy looking with the scoreboard and the real referees, 2 referees.
Well, that scoreboard, that basketball court, that's been there for years. It's just years. And
I mean, that's the kind of showcase that, we could use that 24/7, 12 months a year.
we have to. There's a number of reasons. One, we need the facility rentals because we have a funding problem, as you know, and this is one of the spokes. But it was one of the, we have a great, great relationship, our staff and the City of Millbrae Park and Rec, just an excellent relationship. It's getting stronger every quarter, and this winter, that was a commitment, was to bring Taylor basketball.
You can stop now.
Okay, I can stop that. was to bring Taylor basketball home games to our home court. Was to basically.
I have to go.
Was to let them play on that big court in front of a crowd. We got new bleachers in there too, and everything's going great in there. So it's just part of the community outreach, and we're going to keep expanding that. And as you know, when we generate more fees, we're able to save more dollars. We're able to hopefully restore some of the custodials, that staff that's never been restored in the last cuts, because we, as you know, those fees are calculated with those costs and those labor costs in mind, and that allows us to just increase our economies of scale all across the board. So This is the first reading tonight. You can go through it. We'll go through the second reading in our next board meeting, and then with any additional questions or changes on January 23rd, and on February 6th at our meeting here again, we'll go for final approval.
Excellent, thank you. May we have the audit report?
Well, I guess I owe everybody a big apology. I'm so sorry. For some reason, I didn't have it on my calendar, and I was over at San Mateo Foster City School District pretending that I knew what I was talking about there. So that went well. So hopefully this meeting will go well as well. And I think it should. So I'm going to stick to the PowerPoint, try not to get too far off of things. Space? Okay, thank you. We are talking about another history lesson, June 30, 2017. And I just want to say up front that I am actually not the engagement partner. Jeff Riera is my partner and is your engagement partner. And he was involved throughout the whole process and couldn't make this meeting. He just got back from Colombia. And so he was probably wondering where I was too about 7 o'clock. So every year I touch on the auditing standards. They haven't changed. We are following the 3 basic auditing standards, as you can see here. The AICPA statements on auditing standards, the Yellow Book, governmental, generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And then the state audit guide is not a standard, but it's a guide that's provided by the Education Audit Appeals Panel. It lists 32 different compliance areas, and within each of those areas, there's from 3 to 15 different procedures that we have to apply. Not all of them are applicable to your district. I think there were about 21 or 22 different areas that were applicable to your district. The single audit always comes into play if you spend $750,000 in federal awards. And you spent, I happen to be right on that page, you spent $981,000 in federal awards as of June 30, 2017. GASBs. All right, Governmental Accounting Standards Board number 75. I'm not going to get too much into detail about the government-wide stuff. I've talked about that in the past, how you statement of net position, deferred inflows, deferred outflows, net pension liabilities. So GASB 75 is similar to GASB 78. If you remember, GASB 78 was the implementation of pension liabilities, right? So PERS and STIRS, net pension liabilities. Well, 75 is going to take those other post-employment benefits, the benefits that you provide to your retirees for health, right? And it's going to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and record a liability for that now. And we're also going to have disclosures that mirror what we've done for your pensions. And so that's going to happen as of June 30, 2018, so the current fiscal year. When we come back before the audit for 18 in, September, October, November, somewhere in there, we're going to be looking at new actuarial reports. They're going to be called GASB 75 actuarial reports, and it's going to change the way we account for things. I'm going to look up one number here that I have in the report and just kind of give you an idea what the additional liability in your government-wide statements may be. This is not in your funds. It's not going to have a direct impact on the liabilities in your funds. It is only going to be in those government-wide statements. Keep in mind, in the past we've talked about how pensions, we report these huge liabilities. However, your most important factor is, what are my annual required contributions, right? What am I looking at every year? What am I looking at the next 3, the next 5 years for contributions for pensions? Same concept here. How are we going to fund your other post-employment benefits and how soon? And looking back, the estimated, now this is estimated as of June 30, 2017, unfunded actuarial liability for other post-employment benefits was about $4.7 million. So that would be an additional $4.7 million to your government-wide statement of net position. I'm not going to go through the phases too much. I think I've talked about this in the past. There's 3 phases. The first phase, we come out and do internal control work, document controls, test controls, identify risk areas, and assess risk, and then basically create a plan to audit those risks. And, we do quite a bit of tested controls over human resources, payroll, position control, bid testing, disbursements, the purchasing process, and there's a few other areas we might dig into if we identify risk. Associated student body, we've added some procedures that we hadn't done in the past, just kind of change things up. For a lot of our clients, there's a checklist released by FICMAT that we have a lot of our ASB custodians fill out now that helps us identify risk. So it's kind of helped us prevent issues in those areas. It strengthens the controls over those ASB accounts, and it reduces the risk of audit errors. Phase 2, well, we go from phase 1 to phase 2. We're going from internal controls to substantive work. We're testing those year-end balances, cash, investments, capital assets, long-term debt, and we spend a lot of time on net pension liabilities. Audit results. Did the stamp show up? It's not supposed to be there yet. And it's supposed to come in last and bounce in and look good. So the audit results are great. You don't have any modifications in the opinion letters. We issue 4 different opinion letters for each of the different standards that we follow, and then 1 plus the state audit guide. And so there weren't any exceptions. We didn't have any material weaknesses, and we did not have any disagreements with management, nor did we have any significant passed-on adjustments. And a passed-on adjustment is where we identify something that probably is an error, but it's just not significant, so we move on from it. And sometimes we'll do rational analysis on something and estimate what we think the number should be versus what it actually is. Instead of pulling supporting docs, it's a way to test it. Another way to test, it's an analytical approach. And in those analytics, we might have variances that are immaterial, insignificant, and those would also be a pass-on adjustment. We did not have anything that was significant in that area. So I appreciate you waiting for me, and I apologize that I kept you waiting. That concludes my presentation. Any questions or comments?
So this is an action item to accept the audit?
I do have a question. I do have.
Sorry, Don.
It's okay. Okay, so in looking over the analysis of the change in our net position, there's a, in my view, a significant erosion in the change in our net position to the tune of $1.7 million. So, to me, there's a correlation in your final comments. Maybe you could talk about that, the correlation between the change in our net position to the factors that we need to be watchful of in the upcoming years. Because I think, this is something that not only we as a board need to be mindful of, but certainly our community as a whole needs to be, educated more on what is happening with our financial position. And we've worked very hard to get, keep this district as stable as possible. And those efforts have, resulted in good bond ratings from the rating agencies. But to me, what's happening with our net position definitely could have a big impact on what happens in that area going forward.
Yeah, the net position, when GASB 34 first came out years ago, the idea was to kind of make school districts or local governments look a little bit more like a commercial entity would, or a publicly held company would. And that didn't quite work out, but it has served a purpose in the long run. And with the implementation of 68 and 75 and how they're bringing in these longer term liabilities now that really were just pay as you go in the past, you do get a chance to see, hey, what's it looking like in 30 years? What do these pension liabilities really look like to us? So in essence, that net position, if you just look at the last 3 years, a lot of districts, that net position has gone from a positive number to a deficit number, and a growing deficit number. And it's directly related to the increase in your net pension liabilities. For you increased by $4.2 million last year from 16 to 17. You had a $4.2 million increase in your net pension obligations. Other clients of mine have had $24 million, $30 million, $40 million increases in their net pension liabilities. And their net positions are in a deficit because of it. And it's a growing deficit. And so, if I do a historical trend, and there actually is one in the required supplementary information, from 2015 to 17, those obligations have increased every year. And now we're going to add the pension, the other post-employment benefits to that. So that's going to push that deficit of net position higher. So you're going to have a larger deficit there. So there is a direct correlation with these employee benefits and the long-term liability and the impact it's going to have on you. And it's going to have a direct correlation to your annual required contributions. So you should expect and budget for those increases and plan to put money aside to cover some of those deficits, basically, that's being created by it. And the best way to do that is to fund OPEB, to be honest. Other post-employment benefits, you have the most control over that. It's really tough to get in there and fund PERS and STIRS because you don't have as much control. Those are cost-sharing plans, and you put money in there, it gets shared with everybody, right? Your other post-employment benefits you can control. More direct relationship. We did want to touch on a little bit on the factors of the bearing on the district's future. There's a nice section in the report, the management discussion analysis. There's a page in there, the last page of that management discussion analysis, page 11, does, and this is management's point of view, talk about factors bearing on the district's future. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little, just kind of read through this a little bit. The district has been successful in weathering challenges faced over the last several years, resulting from trying economic times and implementation of the local control funding formula, so LCFF, right? So the change in the funding formula. I think we're in year 6 on that right now, right? Time has passed. So nobody's met the gap yet, but I think the governor's going to fund it. So cheers to that. Therefore, the annual LCFF entitlement will be determined by any available appropriations. Adequate reserves will be crucial to guard against fiscal volatility. Continued cooperative efforts and sound decision making by the board, the superintendent, and the entire staff will be key to the district's long-term financial health. So this is in line with what we're talking about, except where we're focusing on fund balance. So let's take a look at fund balance. Let me take a quick snapshot on that for you. And stop me, because if I keep going down this road, we'll be here all night. So let me just touch on this real quick. I could do a whole 8-hour session on this stuff. And I'm more than happy to do it if you ever want to pull me in and schedule it. My staff won't let me train them anymore. They make my other partner do it because they got tired of me, talking and talking and talking. So what I like to do is look at the financial trend schedule. The financial trend schedule focuses on your fund balance and your general fund. And keep in mind the general fund's consolidated. We take the special reserve fund for other than capital outlay projects, deferred maintenance if you had that, and other post-employment benefits fund if you had that, Fund 20, and we wrap those up into the general fund. And so looking at your general fund, looking at the available reserves as a percentage of total ALCO, 2015 it was 7.63%. 2016 it was 12.31%. 2017 5.62%. So let's take 16 out of there. Maybe there was some one-time funds or something in there. So from 15 to 17 you have a 2% drop, but you're actually projecting to be about even for 18 on the initial budget, which is probably going to be changing here if it hasn't changed already. So fund balance, you've actually maintained and done a pretty good job of maintaining at a level above the minimum reserve requirement of 3%, and 3%, and you're projecting to keep it there next year. So you've done a good job. The total revenues has gone up since 2015, but also your expenses have gone up correspondingly as well. But the good thing is your change in fund balance, your net income per se, has been positive 2 out of the last 3 years. So when I'm thinking fund balance, this is where I go to as an auditor. Now, internally management projects out cash flows and all that, so it could look different on those projections. And I'm looking back 6 months from today, right? So it could look different already. And it's going to look different after the governor's presentations and we get information from them. So things are going to change, and they're going to change quickly. Any other questions?
No, that was good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a resolution to approve the audit report as presented tonight. May I have a recommendation?
So moved.
Trustee Ravello, Trustee Musa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay. Possible future agenda items. Food service update, principal for a day. Anything else to add to that list?
What's the food service update about?
We're going to be expanding. Last year we went out for a survey and just told you about the exciting things in the food service department. And we're just going to build off that, especially with our new feeding program at Lamita Park that just started on Tuesday. And we're going to have results from that and going forward. And then really just to make that department self-sufficient.
Nice. Okay, any other business? If not, I will call for adjournment.
You're watching MCTV, Millbrae Community Television, Comcast Channel 27, AT&T UVerse Channel 99, and streaming live at www.mctv.tv.